Standardization helped us to ensure consistency. It provided us with a framework to ensure consistency. It simplified our trainings when we had new staff and ensured compliance or adherence to the 5S Kaizen principles. Some standardization practices we employed include incorporating general monthly cleaning into our department's year planner. So I have here a picture showing our department's year planner, and we have every last Friday of the month in orange, showing that we have to do a cleanup. So we are all aware of that. The second one is incorporating 5S activities into daily practices. We have here our routines, cleaning routines and schedules. The third was to develop a 5S monitoring checklist. And finally, development of SOP for 5S Kaizen implementation. To the sustainability part, what did we do to sustain our 5S? What exactly did we do? We trained all new staff that came into the department because we had standardized our processes. We trained staff using these sets of standards that we had set. There was also monthly inspections conducted by the quality office, JICA representatives, and the quality coordinators, and all staff were involved in this inspection or audits for the 5S audits. Yes, and then there was interlaboratory competition, an informal interlaboratory competition, and then a development of a reward system to award the best lab that has implemented the 5S. So in the last competition, Bacteriology Lab 4 had the best laboratory. They had put all the 5S measures in place. So we have in short here the laboratory representative receiving an award from the deputy departmental quality manager and the team that they worked with to keep the lab in good shape. We also have here a publication from the quality office showing that bacteriology, we are still in line and then in touch. We placed second for the monitoring of the 5S in the just recent audit conducted by JICA and the quality office. To our conclusion and acknowledgement, the sustainability of 5S within the bacteriology department would not have been possible without these people. So on behalf of the department, I would like to acknowledge the management of the institute for this vision of having to incorporate quality and 5S into our daily activities, the JICA Noguchi QMS project for all the resources and the funds they provide us with to keep us running, Noguchi Quality Management Office. Thank you for your guidance, your support, and for being there for us. And finally, to the Facility Management Unit. We disturb you a lot with our fridges are not working, but anytime we call you, you come for us, and then we are able to keep up the 5S in our department. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Inchi. One thing I got from her, she said we are not only shining the surfaces, but we are shining the hidden places as well. So when we go back to our labs, the hidden cabinets that we have piled up, we can loosen it up and make it to shine. Thank you so much for your presentation. That was a good one. And kudos to the bacteriology department. So we would be moving on to breakout sessions so that we can delve into insights into more quality management systems. And we have some selected very interesting topics that we would be breaking out into. A minute. Sorry about that. Any questions from the presentation? Anyone wants to ask something for any clarification or wants to add a contribution? Please, there's a hand up. Can I get a microphone for her? Third row, middle seat. Third row, middle seat. Miss Entry, please, if you can come and answer the question.
Hello, thank you so much, Miss Entry. I'm just wondering, was there a cost involved? Because it looked very tidy. Did you have to buy bits and pieces to make it happen?
Yes, please. With support from JICA, the quality office, and then the department, we got money or funds to buy some things. For example, in during the 5S process, we had to sort, we had to set, we had to shine, and all of these process. For instance, with the sorting, bringing out the unnecessary items and then the necessary items. We needed resources, and then with the setting, demarcating areas and then labeling them, we had to buy some stationery and other stuff. And also with the shining, we needed materials, cleaning materials, cleaning tools. So yes, there was cost involved, but we got support. Thank you. Yes, 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 yes. Welcome.
So, since you have the 5S rules now, um, I think last year we made nutrition consultants to certain departments. Are you willing to support some of the departments to implement the 5S?
So if there's any HOD here, the HOD will bear with me. At a recent, Susan, you were there. At a recent retreat, I volunteered that the bacteriology department would kindly help other departments that are struggling very hard. And yeah, we'll help them to organize their departments and put their practices and their laboratories in good shape. So please, if you really want those struggling, we are more than happy to do that. So you can contact us and we'll be more than prepared to help you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we shine for bacteria?
Thank you very much. I believe the awards and the compensations are very necessary. The food and the money and the gifts and the chocolates that they receive are very necessary, and it motivates the staff to do more. So our HODs are here. Right. Okay, so we'll take a presentation from Mr. Henry B. Ofori on non-conforming events management. Please give him a round of applause.
Good morning. My head is shining like one of the steps of the Kaizen. Yeah. Uh, so, Prof, I would also assist with a shine step. Yeah. Um, Feels good to be here. Um, I went bald yesterday. Best reasons known to my barber and me. And someone met me and they were shocked and they said, "Oh my God, your head, the shape is an NCE." And so today I'm going to talk about NC management. How wonderful. Yeah. Okay. So may we begin? Okay. This would be my presentation outline. I'll introduce the concept, some definitions. We'll go through the Noguchi process for managing NCs, practical scenarios. I'll conclude and then we'll have some questions and answers. Let's have fun. Okay. So, in fact, I don't have the statistics to show this, but NCE might be one of the most popularly used term in Noguchi today. Am I right? Yes, yes. If somebody says my head is an NCE, I mean, I'm popular. So Non-conforming event. What does it mean when we say an event is non-conforming? It's non-conforming in terms of quality, since we are looking at the quality management system here. A non-conforming event, we would say, is any action or situation that is not consistent or does not fulfill established procedure or requirement. Now we know what requirements are. Um, for many people, requirements are only the standard 15189 or 9001. No, there are more requirements than that for a medical facility, a biomedical facility such as this one. Even requirements from national policies and stuff, they're all requirements that govern the way we work, right? And so when we hear requirements, it's not only the standard that you are accredited to or the standard that pertains to your line of duty. However, national laws, policies, even your standard operating procedures, anything that guides your work, requirements for it. And if there is anything that is not conforming with those requirements, yeah. So in managing NCs, what does a manager do? A manager has resources and tends to harness the opportunities from those resources and mitigate the risk, right? So in NC management, we want to, it says, we want to harness opportunity and eliminate or mitigate undesirable risk arising from events or actions that are not consistent with established procedure or requirement. Okay. So let's look at this right here. Say you have a house and you have a mango tree. I love mangoes. I don't care what fruit is on there. My favorite are mangoes. You have a house and you have a tree, and then the root of the tree. Yeah, you see the root of the tree, and then the top part of the tree which bears fruit. Now, say the tree is an identified NCE. You would realize that the tree in itself is not totally a bad thing, but the tree presents opportunities where you can pluck some fruit and be nourished, like me, or risk where you can have, you know, undesirable outcomes to your building. That is by the roots. So you can see what I'm showing. So this tree here, you have the top part, which presents some form of opportunity. And then the down parts, which are the roots, providing some form of undesirable risk. This is what an NC actually is. Whenever there is an NC, there is an opportunity. Whenever there is an NC, there are undesirable risks as well. And it is the management, the proper management of these NCs that help to, gain the best out of the opportunities or mitigate the risk. So, how do we address NCs? I'm going to take you through the Noguchi. I'm going to take you through, the Noguchi style so that it's more like we can relate. Maybe we'll share that here in people chat. Yeah. So the first step is identification. For the first step to knowing an NC is for you to identify. And how do you identify an NC? You see, somebody identified my head. So one of the ways is audits, through audits. I believe every department here has been audited before. Please, if your department has not been audited before, can I see your hand? So we have all been audited. Uncle, you have been audited before. So when we go through the audit process, the outcome are findings, right? We get findings from the audit. So in the outcome, we get NCs as well. Now, that process, the audit process, is one of the ways of identifying NCs. Then we have monitoring and evaluation. Now, for example, to monitor means to, check periodically parameters, important parameters. Not that you'll be checking anything just because you want to check, but important parameters. And for you to check these parameters, you must have specifications that they should conform with. Because you can't monitor something just because you're monitoring. They must conform to something. And so if they are not conforming, then you can identify them as non-conforming, right? So for example, in our labs, we have a monitoring charts and logs for temperature, for pressure, and all that. Those are ways that we can identify some of these NCs. So if you are not really monitoring, I think you should go and monitor some of these conditions. So you monitor, you don't end at monitoring, but you evaluate. Because you can go and see what is happening, but you need to evaluate to make sense out of the trend. And then say there is an NC here or everything is conforming. Then we have actual events and incidents. So there are times when things actually happen. You know what we call incidences in the lab. For example, this guy, he was so unfortunate. I was there. He was so unfortunate. And he fell. Now, this is an event, or you can technically say an incident. Some of these incidences are raised as non-conforming events when they do not conform or when they do not fulfill certain requirements. So if an event has occurred or an incident has occurred which is non-fulfilling or non-conforming to requirements, then it should be called an NC. Then another way of identification is by having risk assessments, discussions, and review. I believe all the labs here have, if not weekly meetings, maybe monthly meetings or something, where we discuss issues pertaining to our work. And from these meetings, we are able to do some risk assessments, and then we are able to review what we have been doing to see where there are opportunities and then where we are falling short. Okay. So some of the, just to mention a few, some of the NCs would be deviation from policy or procedure, instrument calibration or failure event. So when an instrument is calibrated and it fails, you can raise them as NCs. Internal control failure event, or EQA failure, equipment failure, errors in results or reports, temperature deviations, internal audit findings, and stuff like those NCs. Just so that when you see one, you're able to identify. So in Noguchi, how do we manage NCs? When we identify them, what do? We document. So the next step after identifying is to document it, to have a record of it. Because the brain can only remember for so long. Yeah, and in Noguchi, we have a non-conforming event form. This one. So you see, I don't know if you can see from afar, but let me read. Non-conforming event form. Don't mind the effective date because it can be reviewed. Non-conforming event form, and this is the reference number. So this is the form that we use, or the tool that we use in managing NCs in Noguchi. And this form is birthed out of an SOP called the SOP for non-conforming event management. So you find all these documents on the SharePoint. Yeah. So let's delve in. Now, the very first required field to fill out on the form is the date of occurrence. What is date of occurrence? It means the day the NCE happened or the day it was identified. That is date of occurrence. I am saying this because some people's date of occurrence tends to be 1 year after the thing has happened. Do you get what I'm saying? Yeah, sometimes you take a form and something happened on 15th April and it's being recorded in November or it's being recorded on 20th April. It says the date of occurrence. Then the date of occurrence report. So the date of occurrence report. Now, I'm not giving you a cheat code, but this is how we know that you didn't record on the occurrence date. Because if you are filling out this report in November and the date of occurrence is on 15th April, then it means that your reporting, came in quite late. And, for NCEs or these kinds of events, we need to record and report them in time, like as soon as possible, so that we deal with them. Because for some of them, when they take long, they now, transcend into something else, which may be even deadlier or, a bigger problem than we expect. So we need the documentation, the Gen Zs ASAP. Then it says name of initiator. The name of initiator of the form. So the one who is, filling out the form or the one who is leading to fill out the form. Now the name of initiator could be the person. In fact, it's good to be the person who experienced the event. However, I know in departments we have teams, quality teams, where they sit as a team or people help with the filling out of the form. And so the name of initiator or names of people who initiate the record on this form should be entered there. Then the department, the lab name or room number. Then the category of occurrence. Here we have testing, equipment management, personnel management, internal audit, and so on. So you find the most appropriate one, and then you categorize your NC as such. So if it is an equipment management process, you don't select external audit. So you choose the right one. And there's other, because we know that some things might be out of this scope, and so that you specify where your NC will be categorized. It's fine. Now, to aid objectivity in this process, we don't leave it to people to say, I think it's an NC. I do not think it's an NC. Then it becomes subjective. So the objectivity here is for you to give a reference. Why is it an NC? It is an NC because it does not fulfill a requirement. What requirement? The ISO standard 15189 2022, and then the clause, maybe clause 4.5. Do you understand what I'm saying? Or else people would, like, somebody looked at me and said I'm a non-conformity. Where is the requirement? You see, it's subjective. So if you have a requirement, then we can all agree objectively and say, yes, this is indeed an NC. So this, in fact, is a very important part of the document where you have to fill out the reference. It could be the ISO, the ISO, it could be quality manual, SOP, protocol, requirements, or whatever requirement it is accepted. Yeah. Then a brief description of the occurrence. Here it says brief description, however, the description should be descriptive enough. Brief, but it should be descriptive enough. When I'm not there and I take your form, I should be able to tell what exactly happened, who was involved, not necessarily the name, what happened, who was involved, how it happened, and where it happened. It's very important, because if you just write something like, for example, you have temperature excursion, and then you write the temperature was undesirable because it was reading, the thermometer was reading 7 degrees. For what was it undesirable? Where did that happen? Who, was there when it happened? And how did it happen? We need these descriptions. So we need the what. Oh, you can't see. Okay. You need the what. You need the location. Uh, you need the how, if possible. Sometimes you don't know how. It's okay. But when you know how, it's good to add it to the description. And then you need who. It could be Arize. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Then immediate action. The immediate action, let's see, is the action taken immediately an incident or undesirable event occurs to resolve the problem. And it's mostly a temporary solution. It's not a very long-lasting solution most of the time. You just do that to, save the situation immediately so that you can now look for better measures to put in place. You get it? So that's the immediate action. So immediate action does not really require any comprehensive root cause analysis. We'll go to root cause analysis. It is usually an instantaneous action to resolve an NCE quickly without considering possible future recurrence. Okay. Now, we've heard the term correction before, right? Correction. And we've heard corrective action. And we've heard immediate action. And we've heard preventive action. They are all actions, but sometimes the meanings are, yeah, so immediate action is what we call correction. So when something happens, what you do immediately to resolve the situation, more temporary, it's a more temporary thing. And then I'll go into explain like corrective action and stuff. So this is immediate action, which we also call correction. Yeah, so we come back to the tree. The tree is the NC, remember. So when you've resolved the situation temporarily, you want to now go and sit down and then pay more attention to the cause of the NC. Right. So at this step, this is when you start, searching for what could be the cause. What could be the cause? Is it there? Is it here? Is it here? So you are deliberate. At this point, you are deliberating. What could be the cause of the NC? And then on the form, you come to now document your deliberation. Because you are now trying to find the root cause of the problem. Now, note that when we have a problem or an NC and we don't find the root cause, we might end up attacking the problem from a wrong perspective. And sometimes that kind of solution brings back a bigger problem. So we want to get to the root of the problem to uproot the problem. Rema. So, root cause analysis, it says thorough analysis performed to obtain the best point to completely resolve an NCE to prevent future occurrence. Sorry, you will not find this in the books like this. I've made it in simple terms so that we can all understand. So it says you have a thorough analysis of a situation to identify the best point of that situation that you can attack to completely resolve for against future recurrence. That is what root cause analysis is about. So I believe from now on we'll be doing root cause analysis well because we need to get to the root of the problem and solve the problem. Then there are methods for carrying out this process. There is a brainstorming method, brainstorming, kebi, okay, it happened like this. Why do you think? Why do you think? Why do you think? Deliberations, not like brainstorming. And then we find the best points out of that, and then we proceed into something more substantial for root cause analysis. There are the 5 whys. So this happened. In fact, I want to give shout out to Mr. Eliza. He taught me about the 5 whys. So so something has happened. Why did it happen? Why did what happened to make this happen? Why? Why and why, to get to the root of the problem. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you want to ask as many whys as possible. It says 5 whys, however. You can go to more than 5 Ys. Yeah. So, and then there's the fishbone method. I think some of these methods would be explained much into better detail at the departmental level. If you want me, I can come to your department later. You just provide some small. Okay, then we have the is or is not method. We have the failure modes effect analysis. Now, I picked all of these from the SOP. So if you have read the SOP, you will know that everything I'm saying here is exactly from the SOP. And so you should familiarize yourself with the SOP. Because when you are trying to manage an NC, you can create another NC. Do you understand? So if your management of the NC is not conforming with the requirement or your own SOP for managing NCs, now you have created an NC by just trying to manage an NC. So we should be very clear. For example, when an NC is supposed to be done or closed within, let's say, 5 days, and you close it after 5 days, it is another NC. So it's a very delicate issue, NCs. Then the next part of the form, it says classification. Now this is another area of concern. So for classification, we have two. We have major and we have minor. A minor, yeah. Uh, so major NCs, we have what do we call major NCs? We have NCs that will translate into wrong result. When an NC translates into wrong result, it is a major NC because we can't afford to give a negative to a positive or a positive to a negative. So it is a major NC. So please, we should pay attention because in in classifying the NCs, sometimes there are some mistakes. Wrong result, or you even have the right result, but that NC caused it to be released wrongly. It is also a major NC. So wrong result or wrongful release of result. Then we have NCs that would compromise reagents or compromise uh, specimen or whatever you are going to work with. Those are major because these we believe that these ones would also translate into the results. Does that make sense? Yes. And then equipment failure. Any NC that results in equipment failure is a major. Systemic failure of the QMS. So if there is any NC that happens such that it distorts the QMS, for example, of Noguchi, for example, it distorts the QMS. We would give it a major because then it is something that we have to really look at because the QMS is what drives, all our quality research and everything here. So if there's anything that affects the QMS so grossly, it's a major NC. And then complete non-fulfillment of mandatory requirements. So if there are requirements in the 15189. We all know that 15189 and all those line of ISO standards, they have choices of words like shall. Shall means what? Who knows? Shall in the standards. Compulsory or is mandatory. The lab must do it. Then we have the should and may and can for possibility and permissibility and all that. Now, if it's totally, I don't want to use the word breach because we don't use breach in in audits. So if it does not fulfill completely a mandatory requirement or a compulsory requirement, then it is a major NC. It's a major. So it means we also now have to have an idea of what the requirements of the standards say to be able to do this. Then what are minor NCs? So minor NCs, they are not likely to cause what I've mentioned up there. And the minor NCs, partial non-fulfillment of a requirement. So if there is a A requirement says do this and this and this. You have done A, B, C, and D. However, E has not been done. It could be a minor. I said it could be. I didn't say it is. It could be a minor. And it could be because everything or every classification must be based on risk. So maybe that small part of it could affect results. Then it might not be a minor. Also, if you have recurring NCs, which are minor NCs, but their recurrence tend to, cause a big problem which becomes major, you move the NC from a minor to a major. It's just like risk assessment. You understand what I'm saying? Like if you have a series of minor NCs, which are very systemic and can affect results, or can come into the major class, then you move those together as a minor and as a major NCE. So this is how we classify NCEs. Okay. Now back to the tree. If we are now trying to find the root cause of the NCE, so these are two scenarios where we chop the tree, or we cut down the tree here at the branch. That's a branch, sorry, the stem, or at the root. So these are the scenarios. You can either do this or do this. Now, for most of the time, people find it convenient to do this because this does not really take time. So when you cut it, you have forgotten that the actual root of the problem is there. Because you are not seeing the big tree, you have forgotten that the actual root of the problem is there. What happens to a tree after some time? It starts to grow again. And so if you do not attack the problem from the roots, the problem starts to grow again. And this time it could even be a bigger tree, a more gigantic tree. So we need to do the root cause analysis, and that is where this comes. Root cause analysis and corrective actions. So after deliberating, like I said, in the root cause analysis, we now go to either chopping at the stem or chopping at the root. That is now, after the deliberations, you want to now act on the root cause analysis that you've made or you've done. So you come to corrective action, and then now it is the implementation stage. So what are you doing to solve the problem to prevent future occurrence? So now you can see, I've explained immediate action. Now corrective action says action to take appropriate steps to ensure that there is no recurrence of the same situation in the future. Then sometimes, this one I just brought it as an extra point. Sometimes the NC might have not presented itself, but you can do a preventive action in anticipation of an NC to prevent it from happening or to mitigate the risk of that NC even before it ever happens. Yeah, so we fill out this part. Now, everything we do here should be as descriptive as possible. Then the responsible person for plan execution. So who is responsible to carry out the corrective action process? It should be stated with a date, and then the person should sign. Then now the very important part of this, which is the last part, is how many of us ever have gone back to look at our NCs maybe 3 months after we have filled out the form, or 9 months after we have filled out the form? How many of us have ever done that? To say, okay, now we are checking or reviewing the effectiveness of what we have done. So this is very important. Without this step, you cannot close this form. So we do this step to monitor and evaluate what we have done as corrective action. Root cause analysis, corrective action, we check the effectiveness of what we have done, evaluate to see if it is likely to occur again. Now, when we do that, it says the result may be that we'll accept the corrective actions that we have proposed or we have put in place, and then we'll close this NC, or we will go back to reviewing the root cause analysis we'll go back to starting there again and then come up with a more appropriate corrective action to solve the problem once and for all. So please, this step is very important. I think we seldomly do this step. We need to check, we need to review the effectiveness of our corrective actions and accept or close the NCE, or go back to the root cause analysis and try again, so that the problem is gone and is gone forever. So that the Egyptians you see today, you don't go to church. Okay, so now this is the last part. So it says, this is where, when everything is done, you say status. So the status closed or not closed. So you close it, that is when the evaluation of the effectiveness is done and you are okay. Or if not, you leave it open and then you go back to take another form and then redo the root cause analysis. In fact, whatever you do, you have to attach to the first instance of the NC form. So if you go back to do it, even 4 times, all those 4 forms you filled out should be attached to this one. Do you get it? Yes. And all should be in accordance with the requirements and our SOP. Yes. So this is how we do the what do you call it? Non-conforming event management in Noguchi. And I believe that we can all relate to that form. At least we've all, most of us have done it before. Yes, so please. Yes, okay. Okay, so the practical session would come later. So I end it here. Thank you very much for.
Thank you very much, Mr. Henry Ofori. So that was on non-conforming events management. We'll be having, oh, please don't leave yet. We'll close very soon. We'll be having another presentation. Okay, so if you have any questions or comments, we would have a 10-minute discussion where if you are interested in non-conforming events, you would handle that part. So we'll take another presentation from Ms. Nanabia Ekufulate, and that will be on risk assessment. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. My name is Nanabia Ekufulate. I'm the Assistant Safety Officer for the Bacteriology Department. I'll be facilitating this session on risk management in the laboratory and workplace. By the end of this session, we should understand what risk management is and the various components such as risk identification, assessment, and mitigation. We are also going to go on to learn how to use a risk assessment matrix and apply these risk management principles through interactive case scenarios. That will be the breakout session after this. And then we develop practical solutions to workplace risk. Before we get to the definition of risk, I want to ask, is there anything like a completely risk-free environment? Has anybody encountered something like that? No? Not even East Legon or Cantonment. There's still risk there, right? So yes, there's no such thing as a completely risk-free environment. A risk is an uncertain event with an uncertain outcome. And it was defined by the WHO as a combination of likelihood of an incident occurring and the severity of the consequence if it was to occur. And risk is everywhere in our lives. We encounter risk all the time. By virtue of being alive, we are at risk. Coming to work, we are at risk. Being here, we are at risk. Everywhere. Yes. So why should we manage risk? So if you don't identify a risk, you are taking it blind, because you are still going to encounter it. Failing to assess or manage risk leaves us vulnerable to a lot of hazards, which can lead to serious consequences later in the future. It is important that we manage this risk because it protects people, facilities, and the data we work with in this institution. Yes, it is the goal of the institute to create a safe working environment for everybody. So protecting people is very important to the institute. It also ensures compliance with regulations, and especially important now that we are accredited. It is important that we manage these risks so that we stay compliant to these regulations or standards. It also reduces financial and reputational damage because accidents that result from risks are very costly. Injuries, loss of equipment, facilities, properties, all of these are financial costs that we could incur if we don't manage risk properly. Risk management. Let's go on to discuss this. It involves identifying, assessing, and mitigation of potential risks that may impact an organization's objective. And this is the process we use to manage risk. So in the first step, that is to identify risk, we ask ourselves, what could go wrong? And a lot of things could go wrong in life, but we need to identify it first. After we identify what could go wrong, we go on to assess it. And here we ask ourselves, how likely is this to happen? And if it was to happen, how bad would it be? That is what we ask ourselves here. Now, after we know how high or low this risk is, we go ahead to mitigate it. And we put in measures to prevent or minimize this from happening. And finally, the last step is to monitor the risk. And this is where you check whether the controls that you put in place, whether they are working effectively or not. Here are the key components of a scenario to help us dissect, to help us explain this. So let's take my department, the media room. It has been identified that there has been a couple of falls. People have been slipping and falling in that laboratory. Yes, so that is what identifying it is about. Being able to say, okay, this is not supposed to happen and it's happening. So what do we do about it? You go ahead to assess this risk, how likely it is, and the impact. So let's say we say, okay, it's likely that someone could fall there, and if somebody falls, the impact could be, let's say, minor, because it will be a minor injury. You go ahead to mitigate this risk, and in that session, we think about what can we do to prevent this. And it's always good to attack it from the source, as Henry said. So maybe an autoclave is leaking, that is why there's water there. So that is what you do. You tackle it from the roots. And then you could also do trainings to make people aware. You could put safety signs for people to know that there's a falling hazard. They should be careful when they are here. Yes. So the next step is the monitoring and reviewing of risk. So this is where you see, okay, so the tackling, fixing the autoclave, the safety signs, the training, is it working? Has anybody fallen since we did this? And should we put in more measures, or what we have is enough? So these are the key components of risk management. Let's go on to define what risk assessment itself is. It is a systematic process. This means it has to follow a specific order. It is a step-by-step process where you gather information and evaluate the likelihood and severity of a hazard occurring. Yes, and here you ask, what can go wrong and what can we do to prevent it? So we can see the cycle there. That starts from gathering information, then you evaluate and develop a strategy, select and implement those control strategies, and then you go ahead to review it finally to see whether it's working. And as you can see, it's a cycle. So the cycle of continuous improvement. You always have to monitor to make sure that you are up to date with everything you are doing. So the first step, there's a lot of words we hear when we are talking about risk management. And hazard is part, hazard and risk. We hear it all the time. Let's go ahead to define what a hazard is. It is any activity that has the potential to cause us harm. And it could come in various forms. So it could be a physical hazard, working with electricity, climbing of ladders or scaffolding. All of these are physical hazards that has the potential to cause us harm. Hazard could also be health hazard, and working here, most of us face that because working with biohazardous materials, chemicals, all of that, it falls under health hazard. It could even be psychosocial, and I feel like that part of hazard is a little bit overlooked. But stress, anxiety, depression, that could lead to mental illness. All of these are psychosocial hazard that we need to also pay attention to. It could also be environment. That is maybe wastewater pollution and all of those things. Okay. So now the link between a hazard and a risk. A risk is the probability that a hazard will cause you harm. Yes. So now that we know how to identify or gather information about the hazard, we go ahead to set up a team. And this is very important because the members of the team are very important. You need to include people who understand the process, who understand the hazard. These are the people who need to be in the team because their expertise will make sure that every possible scenario, every possible risk can be identified and mitigated properly. Here are some risk identification techniques that can be used. So we can brainstorm. This is very simple. Use discussion. So you sit down with your colleagues during the lab meeting and then you brainstorm. You can also use SWOT analysis where you analyze the strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats to identify risk. The Delphi technique can also be used where mainly you focus on expert opinions, expert advice to evaluate risk. And the last one is scenario analysis. This is what we'll be using later in the breakout session where we analyze potential future scenarios and their associated risks. Yes. We can also get risk from various things that we do. There are plenty sources. You can observe one day and see that, okay, this could be a potential risk. You could also use the MSDS, Material Safety Data Sheets. All of us know what that is. We work with them in the lab. So they are the inserts or documents that accompany chemicals or reagents. So when you read that, there's information on the possible risk and hazard that are involved in working with that particular. Yes. You can also analyze records. So the safety records, incident reports, you can also review that and say, okay, this has been happening for a while. Maybe we should look into that. So past record is also a good source. And we can also conduct safety audits. This also brings out a lot of risks that we encounter. Then the next step, you have to assess the risk. And you have to consider various factors, like the consequence of the event if it was to happen. So how severe, how minor, how negligible. Sometimes some of the risks, nothing will happen. So yes, so if it varies, it could be very severe, it could be very negligible. And then the likelihood, that is the chance that it will occur or how probable this risk is. You should also consider who might be harmed because working here, there's varying expertise, varying people. There could be interns, visitors around, students. You should consider how this risk will affect all these levels of people. And then what the overall initial risk is and what after putting in mitigation measures, what will be the residual risk. And if it's acceptable and we can continue with work, or if it's not acceptable, we need to do more before we can accept that risk. Yes. This is a risk matrix. Yes, it's a tool that is used to assess risk. It's very simple to use. So it just extrapolates the likelihood of exposure to the consequence. So example, if the likelihood is almost certain and the consequence is moderate, the risk becomes high. There are so many other methods, but this is the simplest method and what is in the Noguchi SOP for risk management. So this is what we use in the institute. So yes, it could be rare and minor, that gives you very low, but the whole idea of risk management is to move it from the reds to the greens. That is the whole point of risk management. Then the last step is to control this risk. Yes. You need to consider the priorities because risks carry different weights. Some could be more probable than others. Some could be more severe than others. So you need to focus your resources on where it's needed the most so that you don't waste resources. So you have to prioritize and see what is very urgent, what we need to do something about to prevent a catastrophe. So you focus your energy and resources on very high and pressing needs. So that's how you prioritize this. And then your resources is very important because if you can't afford to solve everything at once, you need to know how much you have and what you can do with what you have. And then later you plan for the ones you can do in the very near future. The last thing you need to consider is risk acceptance. And this is where you've gotten the risk to a low level and you are saying, okay, the benefits outweigh the risk right now. So you can go ahead and accept this risk, bearing in mind the mitigation measures you already have. Now, the journey of risk from initial to acceptable. Yes. So the risk that you have right after assessment is the initial risk. Yes. I'm going to use an example working with TB pathogen in an open lab, the initial risk you have there is very high. Yes, but when you go ahead to put in mitigation measures, let's say getting a BSL-2A facility, working in a biosafety cabinet, using of PPE, straight decontamination, all of that, now the risk that you have might not be as high. And this is what you call the residual risk, what is left after you put in control measures. But after that, you need to ask yourself, am I accepting this risk? If yes, you proceed with the activity. If no, you put in more measures. Or maybe you stop entirely. It depends, because your life is important. Okay. Then, oh, sorry. Yes, the image displayed there shows the journey from initial to acceptable risk. So you can see initial risk is in the reds. And then when you apply control measures, it comes down to the yellow and the green. You accept the risk before you can continue or start with the activity. Now, step 4. Now, that's step 4, reviewing control measures. I believe this is the most important step because that's what makes us know whether we are on the right path. Yes. Imagine the incident I was talking about, the falling incident in the media room. Imagine after a week or two after, people are still falling down. People are still slipping. You have to go back and say, okay, what went wrong? Why are people still falling? Do we need to should we restrict access? Is there something more we need to do to prevent this? So without reviewing, you can't actually progress. You can't actually know whether what you are doing is working. And what is the point of doing something in circles when it is not working? So you need to consider all of this. So you need to consider the changes that have been there since you did it. So has anything changed? Do we have new personnel? Maybe we've gotten a new batch of interns. Maybe that is why they were not there for the training. Maybe that's why they are falling. Is the equipment different? Is the biological agent different? Has there been a different procedure that we are adding that we didn't used to do? We need to consider that. And then any new knowledge about it. And especially lessons learned, because you can know whether or not it's effective through your incident report. So you need to go back to your safety report book and see, has there been anything like this since we put in the mitigation measures? Has anything like that occurred? That's why it's very important to record incidents and near misses, all of that, because that is the only source, that's the only information you have to help improve some of these things. And the last point is to communicate risk. It is very important that when you are in a lab or a department and you find that, okay, there's something happening here, there's a potential risk here, every single person in that laboratory or in that space should be aware so that they are prepared. And then they're also to be informed on the control measures so that they know what to do. Because if there has been a sign here, okay, maybe we are not doing this at this time, there's restricted access now. This is what you need to do. So you need to train everybody on the risk that you found and the control measures in place so that they can also follow. So if they say, okay, there's restricted, let's sign it. Everybody needs to be aware. This is where it is. This is what we need to do. So you need to communicate risk to every single person involved. This helps the review process and then it makes your control measures very effective. So thank you. This is the end of the introductory part. We will continue at the breakout session with the scenario. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nanabia. So I have a question for the audience. What's the likelihood of getting to work at 8 a.m. if you're a resident of Kaswa and you leave at 7:30 a.m.? Is it almost certain or it's rare or never? Never. Thank you for your answer. So we'll take our last presentation. It would be very brief from Miss Elizabeth Inchi and then Miss Tracy Icha on assessments on internal and external audits. Please give them a round of applause. You can't find the slides. You talk.
Say something in the mic to them that's the little gentleman so or something.
Okay. Oh, hello everyone. Good morning. So I'm Tracy Esirifi. So please, there's a little technical challenge. We are downloading the slide.
Okay. All right, so I'll give an announcement on how the breakout sessions would be while we wait. So there'll be three sessions. One would be on non-conforming event management by Mr. Henry Ofori, then risk assessment, and then we'd have this. So non-conforming event management, if you're interested in non-conforming event management from the presentation and you want further deliberations and clarifications, you stay in this room. It would be on one side of the room. Then if you are interested in Nanabia's presentation on risk assessment, you have some questions, you have some comments, you want to know more about risk assessment, you also stay in this room. Then if you are interested in the presentation we are about to have, you would go downstairs to the combined seminar room. It's going to be for just about 15 to 20 minutes. So just be patient and I hope you would enjoy the session.
The plan was to go down, but I don't trust. I'm not trusting. So we will do all three here. I'm not trusting. Unfortunately, I'm sure I will be right. If we say we should go down, I'll go and find two people sitting there. And everybody will say, oh, we are going down, and then nothing will happen here. So I'm not trusting that that will happen. Because what we want to do is that we want you to have a small discussion, bring out real life events, and then we will come back and then discuss it as you know, what findings that the small groups, people may discuss things a little better or bring things up a little better in a small group. And then we can share it as a larger group. So that we all know, some of the things and we can share. Today is the best practice day. You understand? So somebody may come up with some non-conformity and how to resolve it. And then we can share as a larger group. Okay? So unfortunately I don't trust. So we will stay here. We're supposed to go down for the third group. But I'm sure we can arrange ourselves to be all of us here, all three groups here. Are we together? Or I can just I think we'll stay here. Because I was alone. So let's finish with this one.
Okay. So hello everyone again. So our presentation will be on evaluations, particularly audits. So this is the overview for our presentation. We have our objectives, introduction to evaluations, audits, the audit method, and the roles played during auditing. So the objectives for this presentation is to enlighten staff on what an audit is, the importance of audits, the approaches used by auditors in auditing, and the role of staff during the audit process. So we'll start with evaluations. So evaluations are activities that measure and improve the effectiveness of a system, and these include assessments, audits, quality indicators, risk management, and then staff suggestions. So these are the 12 quality system essentials. They serve as the building blocks for a quality management system. And since our main focus is assessments, it is highlighted in green over there. So it is done to assure accuracy and reliability through the part of workflow in our labs. So assessment is the systematic examination of the quality management system to meet regulatory accreditation and customer requirements. And assessments can be done through internal and external audits, evaluation of performance through EQA. So I think this answers yesterday. There was a question on there was this riddle and the answer was assessments, but someone said audits are the same as assessments. So EQA, so assessments like a broad topic, and then audits is like I don't know how to. So it can be done through audits and it can also be done through EQA. So it's not assessments is not like this is like an audit because EQA is also kind of like an assessment. So when you're doing assessments, you're also answering questions like what procedures and processes are you following in the lab? And also, is there any procedure and process you are following at all? And also, do these written procedures and policies comply with the standards and regulations that we have? So audit allows the lab to understand how well it is performing when it's compared to required criteria such as the 15189 and the 9001. And this performance is for planning and implementing the quality management system, to monitor the effectiveness of the management system, to correct any deficiencies that will be identified through the non-conformities, and then to work towards continuous improvement. So auditing applies to the whole lab flow from when samples are collected to when they are being reported or worked on in the lab through to result interpretation. So auditing is done to be able to detect problems throughout the whole processes in the lab workflow. So there are two main types of audits. We have the internal audits, which is also known as the first party audits, the external audits, under which we have second party audits and third party audits. So for the internal audit, it's performed by the lab to determine conformance to its own policies, procedures, and applicable standards. For this institute, for example, we have internal auditors who perform who check our conformance to our own processes. So it's done by people who are employed by the institute or organization themselves. And they ensure that there's no conflict of interest. So someone working in a polio lab or in a particular polio process is not made to audit that particular process because they have a conflict of interest. Then for external audits, under the second party audits, this is conducted by an organization which has an interest in the processes that is done by the lab. So for instance, WHO might perform an assessment on the polio lab because it funds it. Yes. Then also for the third party audits, this is done by an independent body. So a typical example is the assessment that was done by KENAS. And this is normally for the purpose of accreditation, certification, or licensure. Then some importance of internal audits. So is to determine the status of our QMS, to prepare for the external audits, to increase awareness, to identify opportunities for improvement, for preventive and corrective actions. And these will all arise from the non-conformities that will be gotten from the audits. Then it will be an opportunity for continuing education. It's flexible and cost effective and to fulfill the requirements of the 15189 standard. Sorry. So for internal audits, these are the requirements. So an internal audit should have an internal audit program, which is managed by the quality manager and is done. This includes setting a time frame for your audits, choosing and training your auditors as well, and also coordinating the process. Then you also document your audit procedures. You ensure that your auditors are independent of area being audited, as I mentioned. Then you document and report your audit results. Then you ensure there are prompt follow-up actions on the NCs that arise from your audits. Then for audit methods, we have three main methods of auditing. We have horizontal, which normally checks the whole quality management system. Then we have the vertical, in which we take a lab report and start the audit from there. So when you take the lab reports, who performed it, the lab report will show who performed the test, is the person authorized, which equipment was used, is the equipment calibrated. So the process starts from the lab reports downwards. Then for witnessing, a person is made to perform the process and then the audit starts from there. So firstly, is the procedure performed fit for what is being done, and maybe is the kits verified or not. Then the roles played during auditing, we have the lab director, in our case, which will be the institute director, who would approve the internal audit policies and procedures. Then the quality manager coordinates the whole auditing program. Then the auditor executes the audits as per the schedule. Then the auditee, which will be us, will have to prepare and submit the records for internal audits. Then implements the corrective actions that arise from the identified NCEs. So these are required documents and records for audits. We have policies and procedures, applicable standards like the 15189, which are for medical labs, and then we have 9001, which is for the home management system. Then 17025, which is for competency. Audit criteria or checklist, templates for audit reports, and then corrective action forms, which we use for the NCs that arise from the audits. Then for accreditation and certification, all the 9000 series are compliance based, and hence when you comply to these standards, you get a certification. But for 17025 and 15189, they are competency based, and hence you get accredited to these standards. So this is a summary of our presentation. You have to remember that continual monitoring is the key element to success in the quality system. Audits are important in monitoring the effectiveness of requirements. The audits can be internal or external. They can be focused on a particular process at a time, and the findings become opportunities for improvement. And also, we all have to remember that we have a role to play during auditing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So in the next 15 minutes, we'll break out into these three sessions. If you are interested in non-conforming event management, kindly be on the left-hand side for me. Non-conforming event management, which will be led by Mr. Henry B. Ofori. You'll be on my left-hand side, the very first row. Then if you are interested in risk assessments, which was presented by Ms. Nanabia Ekufulati, please be in the middle. If you have questions and comments on assessments, on internal and external audits, you can be after the camera on the third row. Audit is on my far right. Risk assessment is in the middle. Non-conforming events on my far left. Please let's not go out. Please let's not go out. This is very essential for all of us. It will take just a few minutes and we'll be out of here.
Have a scenario. Have a scenario. Yes. Okay. Thank you. So this is the first scenario. It's an incident in a VSO3 lab. So we are just going to identify the potential risk. Things that's supposed to sit down.
So one of the risks is the breaking of the valve, which contains the pathogen. That's one of the risks.
Going out of that area is not the so the procedure, if you would now the AC, now the full part of the tree is now an opportunity.
Maybe it's towards the
Let's take that.
we have to investigate how that is possible. Because the floor should also be impervious to liquid. You should be able to decontaminate on it.
So like, why is it on the floor? Like, it should be done in a contained area. Like, why is it on the floor? Like, it should be done in a contained area if there's a risk of spill. Should be contained in a if there's a risk of spill. Should be contained in a cabinet, safety cabinet or biosafety.
That's a very important.
Will I consider this an ordinance? Will I consider this an ordinance?
The idea was, if we were a larger group, we would divide ourselves and then everybody would write down the risk and then we'll have the flip chart. The way one more time.
Every researcher receives an urgent email from a colleague requesting login credentials.
Initiated what information can the person get? Initiated what information can the person get access to?
Access to data on
Research.
access to data on
Research.
so maybe
So if they've got organisms that need to be controlled and not released, they may want those organisms for weapon. As a weapon.
And when they come, they know where to find it. Somehow, your email, your password could be linked to so many other things. And this person could get your personal information, forget research, could get your personal information, your address, your phone number. And
Very fast. I don't. Very fast.
Just send something like trust. Send something like trust. Sweet and not money.
not long ago, there was a phishing incident.
In isolation.
Huge email.
And me on it. I'm using the quality that comes to the right side. I mean, the quality important that one and people live with the person was what I have to start up. So I love it. Then after it is we should also everybody from the person that is
Confirm.
that's why you that's why you the reference number and here the reference number and here it's not the whole school it's not the whole school my one
Department has said that, fine, it's quality manager, the quality manager, and maybe they want to actually have that measurement of it. It should be only those four. That's
So I will give you what the might keep documentation or the actually was that.
But now we know that under no circumstance should yes. You should even let the bank teller know your ATM card pin. So how much more something like why you being let it get there? Why you being let it get there?
yes, so give your opinions. Yes, so give your opinions.
I think the system in place, there should be a system in place for
A researcher accidentally spilled a bottle of formaldehyde on the laboratory. Chemical produces a strong fumes, triggering cough and
After we after you save your office.
Safety officer can come.
Thank you. Not
Safety officer can come.
thank you. Not so we should always read the MNC that comes in this area. When you're about to do something, you should know, hey, formaldehyde, let me go and check. Even if you don't have it, it's available online. Go and read. Okay, there's a written about it. Having it, the beneath you, certain about it. Having it, the beneath you.
It's parasitology, the white building, yeah. Only one.
But even when the spill happens,
Students will be reported. Students will be reported.
so almost all of these things that we've encountered are incidents that we need to report in time. In time. Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell. Do we have any other
assistants sees the fire and panics, unsure whether to use a fire extinguisher or
Yeah. Well, but you see, in arranging the lab, we should consider this. There are types of fires.
This kind of fire.
Most of our results in books. So if there's a bush nearby, it could burn it. Most of our results in books. So if there's a bush nearby, it could burn it. Yes. Any other?
Now, I'm just going to observe. I'm just going to observe. So now, it's the form of story. So we can
So when she won't be able to do anything. So those smoke detectors, can we look at other fire detectors other than smoke? Because a fire can start.
That's
What
we take it up. We take it up. When you smell burnt rubber, usually when a socket is burnt, you can smell burnt rubber. Yes, you can see discoloration. It can be hot. All these things are signs. That helps you to know, okay, test that, test that.
So in 2 minutes, you can tell us how your session went. Thank you. Please introduce.
One person to find the root cause analysis. One person to find the root cause analysis. And also the input from root cause analysis will eventually apply to everyone. And so it has to involve the suggested action was that the vaccine should be transported to, we said maybe power fluctuations, and that there are procedures for temperature excursions, and so it should be made for temperature excursions, and so it should be made available.
4 scenarios to speak about. One was on biosafety incident, talking about pathogen spill in the BSL or an enclosed area that even if there is spill, you can manage agency. And probably going to catch fire, don't put it close to these sockets that can wherever we find ourselves. Since we all
audit team, call frameworks. So kind of to audit, and then they will still have the technical skills, and then that'll give a more objective and to audit